appointed public session. It's about, are we on the right track? Is the vision correct? Are the strategies that we've talked about, what kind of strategies that people want? So on behalf of my co-chair, President Etling, and the other members of the committee that are here, the DRI committee, I want to really get this started, get a lot of good, open dialogue, and I want to get to it. You don't want to hear a speech, you want to give us your opinion. So let's get started.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see if I can adjust this without knocking the whole thing over. I did it. I'm Kate Calignan. I'm a partner with HRNA Advisors. We are a consulting firm who is working with the local planning committee and the state on behalf of the Downtown Revitalization Initiative in Plattsburgh. First of all, would the local planning committee members raise your hand? There we go. We have several who are dedicating a significant amount of time to this process. They have been over the last month and a half and will be over the next few months as well. And thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. And everybody, most of you can see at least. Sorry for those who have the obstructed view. It's like we're at a baseball park. What we're going to be focusing on today, this is our first public meeting. We want to talk to you a little bit about what the Downtown Revitalization Initiative program is, what the process is going to be. Talk to you a little bit about what we've learned from conversations with residents, with businesses, with members of the planning committee so far, and in particular from reviewing all of the past planning studies. And there are many of them that have already taken place in Plattsburgh. Most of all, though, what we want to do is open up the conversation. We'll be breaking it out into small groups at the tail end of the evening and get your reactions to our initial assessment of what is the key goals and strategies for Plattsburgh to achieve your vision for the downtown. And then start to brainstorm what are the key projects that we might want to look to just start to achieve those. And I'll explain that a little bit further. First, what is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative? Governor Cuomo announced, I believe in July, that Plattsburgh was one of 10 communities statewide that would be participating in this program, which allocates $10 million per community with the goal of strengthening downtowns into vibrant neighborhoods where the next generation of New Yorkers want to live and want to work, want to make their lives. And as we've been working with Plattsburgh, the reason for its selection becomes so evident based on the criteria that the program lays out. It required that each community have the physical features that really promote a livable, mixed-use downtown, recent or anticipated job growth, so already a basis for economic advancement. The ability to leverage additional public and private investment based on the catalytic investments expected through the DRI program, and commitment from local leaders, those local leaders who are on the local planning committee, and many of you dedicating your time this evening. Again, I'm part of a consultant team that's been identified and retained to help facilitate this process. It's really being run by the local planning committee, chaired by Mr. Etling and the mayor, and by the state of New York, through the Department of State, Housing and Community Renewal, Empire State Development, the Department of Labor, and the Governor's Office. Again, HRNA Advisors, we are an economic development and real estate consulting firm. We are the project managers for this. You'll be hearing from myself and my colleague Connor Muldoon this evening. I'm joined by a number of other partners on the team who you'll have an opportunity to speak with a little bit later on. Jackie Hakes from MJ Engineering, Margaret Irwin from River Street Planning and Development. There's Jackie walking in right there, and there's Margaret right there. Bill Kenworthy and Alethea White from Cooper Robertson Partners, Architects, and Barbara Wilkes and Sam Sikanis from W Architecture. So how does the DRI program work? Again, it allocates $10 million to advance strategic investments in the downtown. And we start by recognizing that there's been a lot of planning that's been done to date. This is not a ground-up planning process We are starting from the work that you've already dedicated time to. But the consultant team is providing the technical support to the local planning committee to synthesize that previous work, fill in any gaps, and with your feedback, articulate what is the downtown investment strategy that's going to have the greatest impact here, and what priority projects would you recommend for implementation with DRI funds? Now, when we say implementation with the DRI funds, you're going to be the planning committee is going to be recommending which projects to fund with DRI in whole or in part, but this really becomes part of a larger document that articulates what the priorities are for downtown. That results not just in implementation of the priority projects that end up getting funded through DRI, but also the ability to highlight what are Plattsburgh's priorities for future public funding, and what are your priorities for attracting private investment. Ultimately, this investment in public funds is intended to catalyze private investment going forward. So again, this is the first public meeting of this process. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to the library for hosting us. We'll be meeting again December 10th and February 11th. These meetings are punctuated with meetings with the local planning committee. Everybody's invited to attend those, although the public meetings provide more of a forum for really engaging you in conversation and getting your ideas. Margaret, do you want to speak a little bit more about some of the other opportunities for getting involved that have been set up as well?
Sure. The first opportunity after this is actually a movie night at SUNY, showing a film called Urban Century: America's Return to Main Street. And it's a great film about what other communities are doing across the country and how people, old, new, rich, poor, of all races, are coming together and making investments and bringing back cities. So I really encourage you to go. That the information about all the next steps or next meetings are in your packet. And then there are local planning committee meetings. Some are during the day, some are during the evening, to be as accessible as possible. And another upcoming community events, one in December and then the final one in February. So there's information about those. There's also a website on the handout where you can provide ideas, stories, photographs, whatever you think would help to convey your feelings about downtown. We also are very seriously trying to make sure that all of these meetings are accessible, so that if you have accessibility needs or if you have observations about how to make the process more accessible, please stop and see me on your way out. And then finally, at the table, right as you get on the elevator, is a survey. You can fill it out and hand it in now. You can take it with you. You can give it out as Christmas presents to your friends and family, or Hanukkah presents, or whatever you can do. Just the more input we get from the more people, the better we're going to be able to put together a strategy that represents your goals. So thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. So again, what we're going to be focusing on today. We had a meeting with the planning committee probably about 2 weeks ago, where we started to talk through a draft vision for Plattsburgh, goals that you have to achieve that vision given the current physical and economic environment, and strategies for achieving those goals. We're today going to be sharing those with you. They don't yet reflect what we're sharing with you is pretty similar to what we shared with the planning committee. It doesn't yet reflect a lot of their feedback. We want to hear your reactions to those, and that's what we're going to be breaking out to discuss after the formal presentation part of this evening. Those all lead to specific projects that then could achieve those goals, achieve that vision, and be considered for funding through DRI. So this is also an opportunity to start to brainstorm which projects do you think make the most sense, which are going to have the greatest catalytic impact on downtown Plattsburgh. The draft vision, which many of you hopefully got a chance to read on your way in, and you have an opportunity to mark that up outside as well. And again, this doesn't yet reflect the direct feedback from the planning committee. We want to get your input as well. The Downtown Revitalization Initiative will promote investment that fosters downtown Plattsburgh's educational, cultural, artistic, recreational, dining, and retail opportunities, and will link existing local and regional assets to enhance the downtown experience for residents, workers, students, and visitors. So some of the things to think about, we can talk about it in the breakout groups after this. You can also mark it up in the middle room. Is this concise enough? Do we need something that is briefer and more to the point? And or are there other items that we need to make sure are addressed within the vision statement that aren't coming up here? All of that feedback is useful to make sure that we're sharing a group vision for what downtown Plattsburgh should be. And I should say also that this was drawn from the vision that was generated for the 2015 local waterfront revitalization program. It's a version of that that's more focused on downtown, but we can keep reframing that. So how do we start to think about what goals might we have for downtown Plattsburgh, and therefore what strategies to start to employ to get there? We recognize that Plattsburgh is really starting out from a position of strength. You've seen population growth in the last 10 years to nearly 20,000 residents. We've got a major student body that's nearly 6,000 students who have the opportunity to interact with the downtown. Significant visitation, largely from visitors from out of state, which means that you're bringing money into Plattsburgh and into the state, bringing in spending that can support businesses. You have an unemployment rate that's lower than one sees statewide, which is a very positive indicator, with major manufacturing and transportation here. And you have a number of small businesses in the downtown. But we know that there's more that can be accomplished. And so why focus on the downtown? Why focus on investments here? We recognize that by investing in downtown, you can increase not only downtown, but Plattsburgh's appeal to residents, to workers, and to visitors. And through that additional expenditure, drive private investment in downtown, and drive investment in Plattsburgh more broadly, which in turn supports the tax base and supports local services. Now, Plattsburgh has a lot in common with regional goals and is really important to the region to achieve those goals. You serve as one of the key nodes on the Adirondack Tourist Network, and that's an important part of the regional economy. So again, the success of downtown Plattsburgh is going to be important to the success of the region as a whole. Moreover, the urban environment that downtown offers is the kind of a place that can attract young talent who are tomorrow's workforce. And we know that employers today, they follow the talent. They want to go where their employees want to live. So the more that Plattsburgh and the downtown can support that workforce, the greater the job generation strength is here, and the more you can sustain the regional economy. The DRI will focus specifically on projects that impact the core of downtown Plattsburgh, which within the application was defined as the historic downtown, as well as the Dock Street Corridor and Marina. And think about how those investments can, again, attract and sustain residents, workers, students, and visitors, those who are already here and those who may come in the future. But we also recognize that the downtown doesn't exist in isolation. We need to think very carefully about how investments here relate to opportunities and investments beyond the downtown boundaries in neighboring areas and in the waterfront. So Connor Muldoon is going to speak a little bit more in detail about the preliminary goals and strategies that we've identified. But briefly, these come out of our assessment of the challenges and opportunities that one sees in Plattsburgh. That you have major cultural and natural resources and assets here, but they're very disconnected. It's hard to understand how, for example, to get to the riverfront, to understand where the cultural assets are if you don't already know Plattsburgh quite well. So there's an opportunity here to create a vibrant downtown that enhances the experience of multiple audiences, again, of residents, of workers, of visitors. You have this great historic fabric, but there's also a pretty high vacancy rate downtown. And so how do we provide a diverse housing stock and shopping options? And finally, you're seeing regional economic growth and growth within Plattsburgh generally, but a fairly limited portion of the workforce is actually based downtown, which means that you don't have that you know, 18/7 kind of activity in the downtown and within retail that can really create a vibrant core. How do we attract and retain businesses and jobs that can support economic development? And Connor's going to dive a little bit more deeply into each of these.
Great, thanks very much, Kate. So the first goal that we're talking about this evening or challenge rather, is the major assets throughout downtown, but the disconnected feeling that exists between some of those assets. And so as Kate mentioned, there are a number of cultural, historical, regional, educational, and recreational and environmental assets that exist throughout downtown. As a community of extraordinary historical significance, the Battle of Plattsburgh, the American Revolution, War of 1812, Plattsburgh's downtown is home to these major assets that impact the broader region. And locally, they activate key corridors, key retail corridors, and pedestrian corridors. We see here called out Clinton Street, Bridge Street, Margaret Street, and Durkee Street, recognizing that that is where many of the storefronts exist, but there are some key vacancies throughout those corridors. So we have a list here just of easily identifiable 17 or so different assets that exist, many of them centered around the historic downtown, but also throughout the study area up towards the water as well with the marina and boat basin. But there are some challenges in connecting those assets and making it a walkable and vibrant community. Activating the waterfront and catalyzing development and creating opportunities downtown certainly is this incredible opportunity that exists if we can address some significant barriers. Some of those barriers being the distance between the river and the marina, and some lack of commercial activity that exists along that corridor for various stretches. In addition to that, connecting those two nodes of activity, or breaking those two nodes of activity, is the wastewater treatment plant that's been studied extensively about how to impact some of the mitigating factors there, whether it's from a site perspective or a smell perspective. That's a very hard infrastructure asset that's not going anywhere, but how can we kind of make that a little bit nicer walking around? And the third being the train tracks, the Amtrak train tracks that go from Montreal to New York City are a bit of a barrier as well in connecting those two nodes of activity. In addition, improving access to the Saranac River can also help to increase the vibrancy of downtown. We see that there are some major infrastructure barriers that are being addressed with some pedestrian bridges, and there are limited access points, limited ways to get down there. But if we can think about what different ways, from a recreational standpoint, can we get people down around the waterfront and utilizing this incredible natural resource. And recognizing that these don't exist, these aren't static events. There's been a lot of investment in the downtown core and the broader region in the public realm. But ways that we can make sure that we have this cohesive identity and linking these assets and attractions. Some of the strengths of downtown is this compact, walkable core. There's an emerging arts corridor linking the Strand Theater to the waterfront. That waterfront, the Lake Champlain waterfront and the Saranac Trail being just incredible natural resources to have in the middle of a downtown core. In addition to the open space along the waterfront, the McDonough Monument, and so forth. There's been some investments in the expansion of restaurant patios out into the street to make it a vibrant place with people moving around. There have been storefront improvements and expansion along the bike network as well. Some areas for improvement, however, are addressing that long and sometimes unpleasant walk to the waterfront, particularly during the colder, darker winter months. Addressing some of the infrastructure facilities and the wastewater treatment plant. Recognizing that within the downtown core there is limited public transportation connecting the downtown core to the broader region. That disconnect between the Saranac River and how can we increase some of that recreational value throughout downtown. Understanding there are some key vacant or underutilized parcels that can potentially be used as a catalytic impact, and what can we invest in there, and what uses can we put in there to increase the vibrancy of downtown. Same thing with the discontinuous retail, not only just larger parcels, but smaller individual spots that we can use for targeted investment. And recognizing that the university, not located in the very core of downtown, but certainly within the city, and how can we better connect those two. So some strategies that emerge from just that understanding what are the challenges and opportunities there, providing activities that appeal to all audiences, residents, workers, visitors, and students. Another strategy is strengthening cohesive identity through various public realm implementations and investments in wayfinding and placemaking and things like that. And then leveraging and connecting to that incredible natural resource of the waterfront. So 3 broad strategies that we'll discuss some individual projects that can fit into those. The second goal being recognizing that Plattsburgh has this incredible historic fabric, but there is a high vacancy that is a counterpoint to that asset. So looking at from a residential perspective, there are a number of residential spaces above storefronts that exist in these historic buildings, but all owners and residents and developers can be struggling with the age of these buildings, and it's expensive to renovate these residential units. Not only is it expensive, but there is a limited market for residential units downtown, recognizing that apartments downtown compete with the broader region, and some of those broader regional assets, regional housing stock, are some new construction and higher amenity price points. In addition, the folks who currently live downtown, about half of downtown residents qualify as rent burdened, meaning that they spend approximately 50% of their incomes on housing costs. One other statistic there being that over a third of downtown apartments were built before 1940, just demonstrating the overall age of the housing stock and the challenges that presents. Looking at a retail perspective, downtown contains 60 or 70 small businesses that present unique retail offerings, but storefront renovations, just like residential units, are costly to renovate, and they face some strong competition from regional shopping centers. Just a 10-minute drive or so over towards the highway, we see some regional shopping centers that contain national brands that choose to locate near the highway due to access to the larger regional population. And so recognizing that small businesses can succeed in downtown, but may require a little bit of technical assistance or support in order to succeed. In addition to that, there are a number of parcels, either vacant parcels or larger scale opportunities that present key opportunities for future investment, whether it's located at the Durkee Street lot or the Dock Street lot as well, as 2 large scale places for potential investment. So strategies that come out of those conditions being supporting investment in existing residential assets and preserving the historical character of those buildings, supporting investment in the existing retail and improving occupancy and the diversity of retail options. And the third being leveraging underutilized assets to produce new residential and retail products. And the third challenge that we're discussing this evening is that the Plattsburgh operates as a regional economic center, but as Kate mentioned, there has been limited growth in the downtown workforce. So recognizing that Plattsburgh is a key center of regional employment, the city of Plattsburgh contains nearly half of the county's jobs and about 10% of the jobs in the entire North Country region. Many of those jobs are in the public sector. And we want to recognize that the recent economic growth that's been seen in the city and the region align with the goals put forth by the North Country Economic Development Council, whether that's building on growth in strong sectors like advanced manufacturing or transportation equipment manufacturing, leveraging the gateway to Canada, and providing investment from other states and from our neighbor to the north. Looking at ways that the city and region can continue to attract and nurture entrepreneurs and invest in community development infrastructure to help keep and retain jobs downtown. Looking at the broader region, we recognize that there have been investments in these sectors that provide new opportunities for residents, whether that's in advanced manufacturing with Norsk Titanium coming in the next couple of months, investment in the regional medical center and Plattsburgh Hospital, and investment in the tourism industry with new hotels and investment in cultural activities and venues such as the Strand Theater. However, when we think about which opportunities, which sectors have been growing regionally, we realize that the places where those companies choose to locate or the facilities that they require don't necessarily match with the opportunities or sites located downtown. When we think about some of these larger scale manufacturing companies like Mold-Rite, Bombardier, or Norsk, they require larger floor plates that just we can't place downtown. So how can we think about leveraging some of that regional growth and seeing if any back office opportunities or support activities can be located in downtown. Recognizing as well that there are a number of investments that are being made to improve student retention from SUNY Plattsburgh students. There are 5,000 or 6,000 students annually that come into the region. That's a tremendous opportunity for potential employment and keeping those students in the region. How can we support those students by developing the talent pipeline and providing opportunities to higher wage jobs? And some of the strategies that result from those existing conditions being, let's support regional job growth that can attract businesses downtown and provide appropriate types of quality space downtown suited to today's employers. And so those goals and strategies lead to the identification of what we're determining right now to be potential project categories. Some of these are place-specific, but a lot of them are different types of investments that can be made to support the goals and vision for downtown. So looking at how can we improve the vibrancy of downtown that enhances the experience for multiple audiences. We've identified supporting connectivity between existing cultural and natural assets. That can be done with further investments in recreational trails, bike paths, pedestrian bridges across the water, and additional placemaking initiatives for the wayfinding and signage. An additional potential project that could receive DRI investment would be creating distinct arts, government, and waterfront districts from a placemaking and identity perspective. When folks enter certain areas of the city downtown, they recognize that, I'm in the arts district right now, or I'm in the waterfront right now, and improving the identity of the various uses and assets that exist. Third being increasing local programming and quality of open space. Improving streetscapes could be a potential investment category, looking at ways to increase signage and accessibility issues. Investing in new gateways and attractions, such as the City Marina or the Strand Theater. It's a potential project that could receive DRI funding. Mitigating the wastewater treatment plant, and also what was identified in previous projects as creating downtown Wi-Fi hotspots for ways to provide different amenities for students and visitors to feel welcome downtown. Looking at the second goal of providing diverse housing and shopping options, some potential projects that were identified there from previous planning efforts and conversations with the local planning committee and community members, developing Durkee Street into a mixed-use city center, expanding funding to help subsidize additional redevelopment of existing housing and retail stock, recognizing that there are some revolving loan funds, but perhaps we could continue to support or bolster and improve those existing funds. Supporting and expanding local businesses through various technical support programs, entrepreneur support, business development support, things like that. And then building partnerships with local and state organizations for additional funding streams and grant application opportunities. And finally, some additional project categories that have been identified in the goal of attracting and retaining businesses and jobs, which support local economic development. Continuing to partner with SUNY and local employers to create business pipelines with the goal of retaining student talent downtown. Investing in flexible co-working and incubator spaces that can support local entrepreneurs. And developing a broader commercial marketing strategy to attract businesses and headquarters to locate downtown. So I'm going to turn it back to Kate for any discussion, 5-10 minutes or public discussion and questions, and then we'll break out into some smaller groups to discuss these goals, strategies, and potential projects.
So we're done talking at you, which is everybody's least favorite part of the evening, I know, but it's helpful to get the information out there. What we're going to do next is you'll see that there are easels set up in each corner of this room. We're going to involve you in actually moving our chairs around a little bit, so we're making little circles around the easels themselves. There are handouts that if you don't already have one, we'll be handing further around that recap a lot of what you saw in here, the goals, the strategies, the vision, and the potential projects. And we want to get your ideas about whether we have, whether we think that these are the right goals and strategies, if we missed anything. which goals and strategies are most important to you as a resident, as a business owner, as a worker in Plattsburgh. And if you have specific ideas about projects that you think should be prioritized and or should at least be on the list for consideration for DRI funding, we want to hear that from you right now. Before we break into groups, and what we're going to do is we're going to break into groups for probably about 25 minutes, and then each group is going to come back and, with a designated reporter, share with the rest of the room the ideas and the conversation that came out in that group. Before we break out, are there any questions about the DRI program or the process that would be useful for everybody to hear as a whole? I guess not. Okay. Yes.
Can you explain how the process will go after we complete the goals and objectives, and we have a list of potential projects? The planning committee weighs in on what they think. Does the city council make the ultimate decision? How does it flow to the end?
So, from our conversation today, the consulting team will take the list, the sort of long list of projects that is generated, start to flesh these out a little bit, and in our next meeting with the planning committee, start to show how these might line up against various evaluation criteria for whether or not these should be prioritized. Have a discussion with the planning committee, narrow that list down to a reasonable number, and we'll discuss as a group what we think that number is, and then really flesh out a shorter list of projects. That shorter list of projects and associated implementation strategies goes into the final strategic investment plan that the planning committee produces through the DRI program. The state then takes those recommendations and determines for certain which projects can qualify for DRI funding and what the time frame is for supporting those. Now, part of the guidance on this is continuing to come from the state as we go through this process, so in real time. So every time we meet with you, we have more information to share about that. But our understanding at this stage, it's really the planning committee making recommendations based on the input from the public meetings. And again, those recommendations will probably include a much longer list than projects that are strictly getting recommended for DRI funds, because again, you can have priority projects that are going to be instrumental to achieving your priorities for downtown Plattsburgh that may or may not end up qualifying for DRI funds. But ultimately, it's the state making final determinations based on the recommendations coming through this process.
Where do the cost estimates come into this, so you know what you come up with a list of strategies and priorities. Where do you start to flesh out their costs?
So we have MJ Engineering on our team.
Mm-hmm.
Certain projects have more information about them available at this stage than others. And so part of what we'll be looking at is what information is already out there on cost estimates. If a project is very high level at this stage, there are some rules of thumb for how you might cost something on a linear foot. But the next step that you're funding may not be full construction of this public project. It may be there is a further evaluation study that needs to be done to totally determine that cost.
Question back here, Kate.
Yes.
Two concerns that I have. This is the first meeting I've attended, so I really haven't even had the time to educate myself about how far we've gotten, et cetera, is that I run a business and I am 24/7 involved in the business, and I do not have time to attend public hearings. However, I have a lot of concerns that I hear voiced throughout the city, and residents cannot attend the public hearing. In the past, when the Common Council has brought anything up for that has affected the city citywide, they've had not only public hearings, but they've done, kind of some publicity, et cetera. And I wondered, is there any other way to get public input rather than just physically having people attend meetings? I don't know if through the wards, they can actually have some meetings at various times. I know it's very hard to get people in the city that have, their own business, et cetera, to come and give input. The other concern I have when we talk about cost analysis, when the city has any major projects that they're doing, they put it out to bid, et cetera. my concern is when you're talking about cost analysis, it sounds a little bit narrow. And it sounds to me like with something as large involved as this, that we should be getting maybe not necessarily bids, but some analysis from various experts rather than just on the planning committee. And the last concern I have is that it seems like the planning committee is the final one that makes some of the major decisions, and I have a feeling that there may be some biases within the committee. So those are some of my major concerns. The other ones I'll voice if I'm selected to be as part of the group.
Thank you for sharing those. And thank you for coming tonight. We recognize that you all have your own lives, and it's really hard to dedicate a couple of hours, whether it's in the daytime or the evening, to come out to a public meeting. And that's why we've tried to develop a few different ways to provide input. Do you want to speak a little bit more on that, Margaret?
Sure. The meetings will be videotaped. Thank you to Mountain Lake PBS for doing it tonight. And that will be on the city's website. So that speaks to the maybe sort of educating oneself about how things are going. The planning committee meetings are videotaped, and the public meetings will be videotaped. There is in the city website, there's a web page on the DRI, and so you can follow progress there. Everything's posted, meeting notes, meeting invitations, all the materials, the engagement plan, PowerPoints, so that's all as transparent as it can possibly be. And then if you pick out one, there's a little set of business cards in the table out here. That has the web link, including an email address where you can send comments, questions, anything that you feel the planning committee and the consultant team and the city needs to hear. So it may not be perfect, but those are a few ways that everybody can stay involved in the process.
And I understood some of that. I wondered if, as part of this process, because it's going to be a long-term project, that maybe ward councilors could reach out to their constituents to get them actively engaged in the process. Because there's a lot of apathy in the city of Plattsburgh, and I won't take the time, but I've lived here over 50 years, and what tends to happen is we spin, and we don't have a city-wide engagement. And I know you are actively trying to do that, but some of the concerns I have is that this should be a way to get the entire city to be recognized as a place to come, and not just to this particular project.
Thank you.
I'd be willing, I'm on the committee and I'm happy to meet with you separately if you want, so they can come to your business.
Thank you for reaching out.
Yep.
Yes, my name is Alan Booth. 1995, late 95, the then Mayor Clyde Revenue appointed a downtown future planning commission. There were 10 members: Alan Booth, Robin Kaiser, Molly North, Mark McKella, engineer, Tom McKenna, the architect, David Merkel, property owner, Chris Rotella, city councilor, Rosemary Schoolmaker, the community development director, John Seaton, a local real estate broker, and Dan Stewart, who was then city councilor, later mayor of the City of Plattsburgh. We worked diligently for 6 months. Thanks to Rodney Brown, our professional facilitator. The process worked. We came up with a very easy to read 10-page report with addendums. I think this report is timeless. I think it applies to year 2016 as well as it did in 1995. We went through a vision statement, we went through the goals, we went through the objectives. I dare say that when you do your goals and objectives, it's all crystal ball stuff, and very likely your goals and objectives will very much mirror these images. What we principally did was we came up with 150 priority recommendations in priority order, doable things that some of us lobbied the city council to do these things. Some were done, many were not done. I dare say today that many of these to-do things are still workable. I will tell you, and I'll tell the audience that probably the item that got the most votes on our committee and we had a thorough process, was to create 2 lighted water fountains. Look at the fountain at Hawkins Hall. One between the Kennedy Bridge and the Bridge Street Bridge, and then one down by the monument. Hasn't been done yet. There's a lot of things in this report. I asked the committee to look at this report. I'm sure it's available at City Hall, and continue what we started 20 years ago.
Thank you. Hopefully the goals and strategies that you're seeing here are not new, because we've made every effort in looking back over past reports. You guys had these conversations many, many times before this. So a lot of this should frankly look very, very familiar. What we're trying to do is synthesize a lot of similar processes in the past and get very quickly to that list of projects, but we'll make sure that we're looking at this report as well as part of that. Thank you.
Could I mention one other thing? Mr. Booth brought up a good point. I own a property that Frank Arbe built, but many years ago, he was one developer that wanted to develop the same area that you're now developing. And he came up with his own plan that the city took away many thoughts but never, went to work on it. I think the point that Mr. Booth and other people in this room would say is that the city has many times hired professionals to come up with plans, and we have never implemented them. There are zoning codes that we've never implemented to make our city a better city to live. It's not just the point of bringing other people outside of the city to live and work and shop. Is to make the quality of our lives in the city better. And one of the issues that I'm hoping we will talk about in the groups is that the issue of burned buildings that don't get, demolished or whatever, these blights are part of the bigger picture too.
So these are the exact sorts of things we want to make sure that we're covering as part of the groups. Any final questions on process before we break out?
I just have a question on terminology. Twice, and these are very specific, but twice you mentioned retaining student talent. What are you thinking of? Can you be a little more specific on what you're talking about?
That you have this great group of students who employers would be attracted to if they were staying in Plattsburgh.
And
So if students graduate and then leave, that's a missed opportunity. Now, you're not going to get all of them to stay, but the more that you can retain that, the more you can grow the economy.
so you have to think about what kinds of majors are coming out of the college and where they may be possibly employed.
Right. Yes.
I think some of that's actually happening right now. We have an intern working at our company. We're at the train station. She's from Plattsburgh State, graphic design, and we said, would you be interested in staying here? She's from down by Saratoga, so it's a little too hard to compete with that racetrack and all. But I will say that I think some of this is happening right now. Just trying to figure out, as part owner of that company, how do we foster that and create an atmosphere. She doesn't know where she would live, that sort of thing. The college housing that she's in now, she wouldn't want to stay there. So I think that's something that's very, very important. Is for a long time, I'm a military brat. The reason I'm here is my dad was stationed here, met my mom. You can tell the rest of the story. But we have an opportunity to bring some new talent. How do we foster that? But I do think, on a positive note, it's happening as we speak. So,
Like you said, then we want to keep them here.
Exactly.
After the intern.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure that we have enough time to meet and then report back. So I'm happy to answer any other questions one-on-one as we're breaking out. But we'll have one cluster by the easel right there, another in the corner. If you wouldn't mind picking up your chairs and making a semicircle around it. And we'll also make sure that everybody has a copy of the handout that we can use for reference.